All right, so day 2, guys. We're out here talking about shutter speed. I typically shoot shutter speed on manual, but since for this class we're doing sort of a basic introductory level, we're gonna start in shutter priority mode. You're gonna pick your shutter speed and let the camera do the rest of the work for you. So all the heavy lifting will be automatically done, and you're gonna pick the shutter speed that will best help you either freeze motion if that's what you're trying to do, or just allow the right amount of light to come into the camera for the perfect exposure. We're gonna go ahead and flip the mode from manual over to TV, which is also known as the shutter priority mode. So for most cameras, it's just the top dial. You're gonna push in and just turn it till you see the line on the top of the camera line up with the TV. And that'll get you ready to start shooting. I'm gonna start with a really slow shutter speed, just to show you what it looks like not to freeze motion. You're gonna probably see a little blur in the image. You'll probably see a motion trail coming off whatever subject I shoot, whether that be a car or that be a person. And that's just to let you know that if you aren't cognizant of where you're shooting at, you're gonna end up with some motion blur. So I just did 2 new exposures. I shot a couple frames at 1/500, which is sort of in that grayish area of where you can start freezing motion. And then I shot another frame at 1/2500, which is going to be a most likely to be able to freeze motion. One of the things I do, if somebody's running past my lens, I will pan the camera with the motion. That just helps add to the ability for the shutter to freeze the motion. As you're shifting to manual mode, you're gonna be in control of the 3 parts of the exposure triangle now. You're gonna rely on your camera for the exposure meter. So when you look through the lens, it's gonna give you an idea of whether you're a little too dark, a little too light. So you're gonna still use that, but everything else is gonna be you. You're the computer now. So you have your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO that you need to contend with. And what I like to do as a good tip for people beginning with manual mode is I like to decide which of the 3 things are more important to me as I shoot. So since today we're gonna be shooting a couple things moving and trying to freeze those things, the first thing I'm gonna take aim at is the shutter speed. So I'm gonna go ahead and dial in something I know that will work and something that we shot earlier that I know will carry out. So I'm gonna go with 1/2500. That'll give us a good starting point. Now, I do know that it's overcast, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and look through my shutter, half press it to see what the exposure is like, and it looks like it's reading like 2 stops too dark. So I already know that I'm gonna have to ratchet up the ISO. So I'm gonna just throw it in the neighborhood of 400 because I know that was working earlier, and it might even go to 800, we'll just see. Yep, 800 gets us way closer. And now that I only have one more tweak to make, it's only aperture. I'm almost at the bottom aperture, meaning the lower number that I can get to. I'm at 3.2. To make this a perfect exposure, I need to shift it down to 2.8. And that's how you problem solve your way into the final exposure. One thing I did try on manual, which is something that some people try when they're shooting, say, NASCAR races or something like that, is they purposely drag their shutter, meaning they use a slow shutter speed in order to freeze the motion of one particular subject while blurring everything else in the motion. And this is where that sort of panning thing that I talked about in the other part of the video will come into play. I put my shutter speed on 1/40, which is super slow, especially with light this bright. I had to jack my aperture up to 9, so not very shallow depth of field. And then I had my ISO on, I believe, 100. And I picked a bicycle that was moving at a decent speed, and instead of just shooting him from a stationary point with the lens, I decided to pick him and then pan with him. And what that allows you to do, if you do it right, and it takes a lot of practice, and I don't know if I got it perfect, but what it allows you to do is it allows you to capture the bike who you're moving with in the frame, keep him in focus, sharp, while everything around him is blurry. That's just one little fun trick you can play with. might not be the best for any of your photography, but it could be a fun thing to do if you happen to shoot a car race or a cyclist race or just something fun like that.